Howdy doody, ladies and gentsies. It's day 9, day 417, where we learn to be a better gamer, and I've been a jerk. You might be saying, day 9, how could you have ever been a jerk? You try to give people piggyback rides as a form of friendship and manliness. I'll tell you why in just a moment. It relates to this question. We were looking at this situation where we saw a Hellion in this base. We identified that there had been some Reapers early on. And we asked ourselves, what could our opponent possibly be doing at this point in time? We have seen only this. We're pretty sure that there's no expansion here, but there could be very well a command center, floating down here somewhere. And in the chat, I asked, what are some strats that could be going on? This is why I would consider myself a jerk, because I was doing a little bit of an experiment. Before the break, I asked the same question on this very screen with this production tab open, where it was Marine Tank Medevac going on. This was intentionally placed here to do a little bit of polluting of the brain. In reality, we can just look over here and wow, looks like show's going Marine Tank Medevac. He has a couple add-ons going on here. Wow, huh. Interesting. Neato. Nifty. We can clearly see what's going on. But the one thing that bothered me is that when I saw the chat in between breaks of what people were saying, very few were listing out all the possibilities. This is a big trap that you can fall into, which is where you're watching a game and you see what both players are doing, but you have to go a little farther and think about what both players need to be worried about. You'll see Artosis mention this sort of stuff all the time, where he'll say, well, it looks like Terran is taking another command center, but the Zerg doesn't know that because he can't scout. There's Hellions on the map. So Zerg still has to be worried about a whole bunch of drops, a whole bunch of this, a whole bunch of that. You can clearly see that there's no way that Terran's attacking anytime soon. He's taking 3 command centers early on. But you still need to worry about that. So at this point in time, when we have seen... well, we accidentally zoomed forward a little bit. I don't know how that happened. So at this point in time, when this Hellion's in here, the sort of things that we really need to be worried about are things like Banshees would be a potential problem, some sort of Banshee follow-up. We need to be worried about some kind of early expand sneaking its way in. The fact that Show actually ended up making some Marine tanks is a very unusual thing to do. Extremely unusual. But, as you can see, all it takes is one player to do it once to make sure that we're worried about it. So again, Banshee's common, Expand is common, whole bunch of barracks is common. Going Marine Tank Medevac off 1 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, really uncommon in this matchup. But uncommon doesn't mean anything. He still could be doing it. And that's what we actually end up seeing here. So this is why we end up seeing a couple of decisions get really forced by TLO. Still making tons of drones. Still throwing down these spine crawlers. One thing that makes TLO strategy quite unique is this massive spread of creep. And TLO ends up losing an Overlord, which I think is just a teensy-tiny bit of sloppiness. So, okay, here's some things that end up being a little bit forced for us. We're almost required now to get some sort of Roach Warren up. There could be any number of Hellion attacks coming up, Hellion drops. I mean, we saw the Hellion, so that way we know our opponent at the very least has some sort of factory. This move of this spine crawler to the backside, well, we had 2 at the front to deal with any sort of early attack, but now we're almost kind of forced to do that. Why couldn't we rely on Zerglings to defend us against a number of early pushes? Why are Roaches what we have to do? Because we don't have Zergling speed. What if he comes in with a whole bunch of speedy Marines with Stim and a Medevac? Hell, what if he just has any Hellions in our base? 1 Medevac drop of Hellions kills us instantly. So we actually are fairly forced to get Roaches at this point. It's pretty clearly the only thing that we can really do. Now, again, I'm actually going to pause because this is... only Show would do this. But... I want to point out the link up between this early Queen, late Gas strategy and this Roach Warren. Very easy to be like, whoa, TLO's being crazy twice in a row. First the Queens and now the Roaches. TLO, my hero. You can kind of clearly see, just if you list out all the possibilities, that, wow, yeah. I mean, we almost have to get this Roach Warren up. There's no way that we could defend an early push of anything with slow Lings and some Queens. Especially not if he drops in our base like this. That's why these Roaches are halfway done. Imagine for a moment with this ridiculous composition of units if there were no roaches coming out. If it was just tanks, reapers, with a medevac healing it, it would be really rough. But just a few roaches, more than enough. And another structure I think we're fairly forced to build soon is an evolution chamber. We need some sort of spore crawler. We don't really need a ton of spore crawlers because we had 4 queens. If for some reason Show did not do this crazy drop at the back and did go for fast banshees, we'd probably want an evolution chamber up right now. We don't really necessarily need that at this point. One of TLO's coolest aspects of his play, if he's going for this Roach Ling style, as we can see, he's just started his layer up, so it's going to be well behind your average bear. But hey, let's spread some creep early on to help reinforce our largely ground army. There's all these very clever connections, which is why TLO can make these unusual mixes work. He's not just going Roach Ling, he's going Roach Ling with stupidly aggressive creep spread really fast.
Metamorphosis complete.
Now here's potentially a weird situation to be in, where we're marching forward with some roaches, right after we hold off a frickin' tank Reaper drop. Why is that okay? It's very easy to send a bunch of roaches and lose. I'm sure all the Zerg players watching have done that, where some Hellions come at them early, and then you counterattack with a whole bunch of roaches, and you just can't break through the front doors at all. Worse, they have a bunch of Marauders with concussive shell. Pfft, stinks. Well, we know our opponent can't really have, like, Stim Marines to track us down, because we just saw a frickin' Reaper medevac tank drop. Even with Show getting about as fast a stim as he can't really have that stuff. Look at the speed, 2.25. Look at the speed on Marines, 2.25. Speed on the tanks. Well, they're siege. They actually don't reveal the speed. But a tank is not faster than a Roach. So that's what makes this attack okay. Anytime where you have your units being too passive, oh, the catastrophes that can occur, it's great to be aggressive with your units, as long as your opponent doesn't have faster units of his own. So TLO, interestingly, delayed these 2 geysers as well. He's really focusing on roaches and lings. And with all these units, he'll be taking a pretty fast third. Still some annoying drop harass. We only recently got Zergling speed anyways. Roaches end up being pretty much the correct response. Now here's some sort of cool decision making from TLO, getting this +1/+1 for range melee. What? Getting speed for roaches. What? Seems like a very uncommon mixture. Moreover, taking this south expansion, this is ordinarily a really bad decision. But we have creep spread all the way, connecting everything. We can be in a ton of places at once with a ground-only army. Infestation Pit coming up. Overlord speed coming up. Overlord speed might seem unusual. Makes sense if we have a just ground army. We need to be able to position our ground army correctly, so let's use some speed overlords to get that positioning right. Why might we be able to skip speed overlords if we're going Muta, Ling, Baneling? Because we can easily get good positioning by just having our Mutalisks swim around his central army position. We can always catch his army out of position, or know the exact position of his army if we have these super fast Mutalisks. We don't quite have that luxury with these roaches. And the infestors are sort of like the final component to a Ling-Roach mix. If you're going Ling-Roach too long, actually, let's just stop for a moment and say we're going Ling-Roach. What's the next step? Well, if I went for Mutalisks, I'd probably have to get them kind of quickly. I mean, if I go for Mutalisks regularly, I start harassing right off the bat and really getting in his face with it. If I delay it too much with Roach Ling, I'm going to get like 9 Mutalisks out right when he's beginning to push, and suddenly I can't harass with my Mutalisks anymore. Ugh. There's a lot of tough considerations when you think, well, where can I go next? Maybe Banelings? Can I do that? I mean, Banelings will help, but I don't see how that's any different from having a lot of Roaches and Lings there. I mean, Marines are actually terrible against roaches in large numbers. The Infestation Pit seems to be the one that reinforces it the most in terms of economy. Mostly minerals with Roach Ling, mostly gas with Infestors. And just in terms of seeing it work, it looks and feels good when it works, but still, we'd like to know that underlying reason why. Continuing to sort of expand forward, and what's cool about this this speed carapace thing for overlords, it lets us spread our creep super mega fast. We can easily just do some creep dropping, like we're seeing TLO do, and just begin running it down. Now, we haven't actually gotten to too much of the exciting part of the battle, so I'll just go ahead and speed up. Spire is kind of never incorrect to get, in general. I still, of course, like the Pathogen Glands upgrade a good bit more, just because Infestors are going to work a little bit better. If we're spending all these minerals, again, on Roach and Ling, we're going to be spending our gas on Infestors. Mutalisks, or excuse me, the Spire is never really that bad to get, because there are always times when you're going to want to be teching to the Hive and getting some sort of Broodlord tech up. Pretty straightforward. The Burrow, though, is another thing that I think a lot of players forget. I don't know why any player doesn't get Burrow in the modern day and age. It's like so good. Especially if you're going freaking Roach that heals so quickly underground. Sure, Burrow Banelings are cool, and sure, burrowing a Ling here is good, but Burrow affects TLO's entire army. And Sho, because he was weird and began making tanks, like, off one factory before he even expanded, he now has a frickin' ton of tanks. A stupid amount of tanks. But at this moment, TLO is doing something really, really basic in a weird way. But it's still basic. He's just looking at expansions. Just making sure that his opponent can't have that many expansions. So, for instance, this Overlord over here, he has speed for his Overlord, so we can actually plant it there and begin adding creep. Oh, cool, that's another reason why it makes sense for us to get speed Overlords. With Mutalisks or speed Zerglings, I could just check. It's hard to check bases with an immobile Roach army. But here, with this speed Overlord, I can easily check it out. How are we monitoring this expansion? By actually walking creep tumors to it. But right now, if I'm TLO, I'm not going to be as worried about this force, because my opponent hasn't even begun to knock down these destructible rocks. I actually think that was a little bit of an error on Sho's part that he didn't do it. I'm not going to be that worried because there still isn't an expansion here. I know that I can even sustain some pretty heavy losses, and if I kill this off, I'm still in great shape. And TLO is still taking these bases up, but he doesn't actually need gas as much as he needs minerals. Obviously, he can do with a lot of both. But he's not in any sort of form of desperation. Look at the mini-map. What's a lot more threatening if you don't have Mutalisks? Well, drops are. So cool, we have freaking Overlords spread out absolutely everywhere. This is one benefit from TLO having been Terran and then switching over to Zerg. He's used to having a lot of a map awareness as the Zerg pieces to combat the same sort of drops he'd do as Terran. Now this battle, though cool, the big thing that I want to focus on is the way that he controls launching a handful of infested Terrans to absorb tank shots, so he can run all the rest of everything in. Virtually no fungal growth is grown. Almost none. Doesn't really go as well as he'd like, but hey, still no expansion, feeling really comfortable. Interestingly, in the last minute, let me just show you how much of a huge baller TLO is. Now let me actually come back right to here. Look at this kick-ass baller. This is what makes TLO the man. Watch this. Okay, there's a huge attack here. Where would your focus be? Well, probably here. Well, not TLO. Literally, in the course of this huge battle, about to kill him off, he still has enough map awareness to glance down at the mini-map and just make certain that that Overlord is in the right place. What a baller! Oh! I have never been so excited about an Overlord moving like 5 inches in my life. That is awesome. This is what's making this whole shenaniganry work really well. Well, it sure stinks that I'm losing this expansion, but you know what? I have 4 bases up, and you have 2 bases up, and you're not even attempting to take care of it. TLO's still spreading the creep like a baller! Oh my god, that delights me. And there's that same hurling the beach balls out. This is the battle we just looked at. And wait a minute, look at that. He's even sending Overlords down here to check up on expansions. Because the last thing you'd want in a time like this is to be losing because you held this battle off and your opponent had a bunch of units elsewhere. This is a pretty scary fight. We obviously need to be a little bit careful about doing something like boxing like this and selecting overlords when we send them into the fray. But TLO just sort of lets this one go, building roaches and lings. And a really nice aspect of TLO's positioning with all this creep, he knows exactly where he needs to move his army. There's no force rushing down here. Maybe a spine crawler there would have been nice to put up a little bit of a delay. But now that this small force is moving down, TLO can comfortably rearrange. Nothing moving along the top front. And with a nice, clean, easy for breezy assault on all sides, even though TLO is down this expansion, he's still in comfortable position because there's no expo here and no expo there. Aww, yeah. Now, this game starts to get really frickin' crazy really fast. TLO making himself a lot of queens to keep spreading creep, and also because he loses them because he sends them into battle very frequently. This was a little bit of unfortunate positioning at this point. I'm questioning whether it's a reasonable idea to get a Corruptor or two if you're going for this sort of style. It'll help in the battles because you have Roach Ling and a few Corruptors in there, but I don't know if that's too pie in the sky, if that's too idealized. Either way, TLO can do all sorts of fun burrowing. Just repositioning everything, and even in the Game of Drones cam, even with this huge force moving in, we still have a good vision sense of where everything's going on. The one thing that I think is so important for this style is continual creep spread, which, even though all this has been evaporated, we see TLO still spreading the creep tumors. Still spreading. Now, one thing that I've seen a lot of players do when they do this sort of Roach, Ling, Infestor thing. Oh, that's an evolution chamber. Huh. A Baneling nest pops up really late. It's kind of, you eventually get the Baneling nest because burrowed Banelings are just so good. Originally saw Sheth do this a lot on Shattered Temple. In fact, a lot. I want to say almost all of his MLG games from last year had him getting a late Baneling nest if he opened this way on Shattered Temple. It's another great way to control space because the real issue you're going to have with this sort of army is that you're going to be feeling defensive, feeling like you have to pull back and whack them down in one fell swoop. You won't have the luxury of zergling Muta counterattacks or swinging in and harassing here while the army moves out. It's really hard to push his army somewhere. You have to wait for it to get a little bit in a dangerous spot. And the Banelings are a great way to control space. Burrow 2 Banelings there. And you might say, well, wouldn't that also be true with Ling, Baneling, Muta? The answer is absolutely, man. Go ahead and get yourself some of that happy time Banelingage. So, right before I think we're going to step into break number 2, I want to watch the beginnings of this little TLO counterattack. This is increasingly the big threat that Roaches play in any matchup. They're fast enough that you can pull here and do what's called a cut-in, where you can move all the way here and then pull back and attack right here. This is one of the most common maneuvers in any matchup at all. A cut-in is where you have two things that you want to attack. This thing and this thing. So what you do is you push as far in as you can towards one, and then you cut back and hit the other. This is really common with expansions where, you know, let's say I want to hit this one and I want to hit this one. It's sometimes better to take my army and to try to push here and then move up, as opposed to just taking my army and wandering it all the way there. Or likewise, if I'm Terran, it would be really great for Show to push up to like here. To push up to here, and then once he's here, then to cut down. And to do that. So again, if we look at the mini-map, instead of moving joint straight in a line, he cuts in and then bounces back down again. So with these Roaches, you can do these really nice counterattack cut-ins and then just pull back around and do a surround. No matter how sophisticated all this is, sending Overlords out to check out these southern expansions. We'll see them get there in a minute, but still, it's just a sort of scout, sort of check-in. So we can do this sort of counterattack if we want, but this is an important judgment call moment. You just move in and you start pulling all the way back, and you get a nice surround flank with all these units. Look at all these units from TLO, constantly trying to reposition to get into a good angle to deal with all these Marines. And kind of in the same way that if you have Mutalisks, you want to run away from Thors. If you have Roaches, you just want to be hitting the Terran wherever there's not tanks. Roaches are so good against Marines. We didn't have any Banelings at all. And there were tons of Marines, and the angle was not really that great for us. And we still did a very nice job. And cool, look, we can always cut back. TLO, I would say, didn't quite have as much coordination in that attack as he would perhaps have wanted. And that's one of the reasons why the game ends up being this giant ball of insanity that we're going to end up seeing. So we're actually only halfway done with the game. It's at the 20-minute mark, and there's still another 22 minutes to go. So what we're going to do is take a break, and when we come back, we're going to look at the insanity of this game, and specifically talk about how when we're in an insane place, if we just have some simple rules that we're working with, like really clear, clean, simple rules, we can find our way out of the situation the same way the TLO figures his way out of the situation. Ha! Let's listen to some music from Ludic Zombie Nation.